banks want to be in because they're keen to get their people back, the best buildings, the most amenitized buildings, the most centralized buildings, which is great for those. But what happens to the C class?
Yeah, so Class A is at 96% occupancy.
What? No way.
Well, that's the headline rate.
Bullshit. Bullshit. It might be 96%, but what they're not telling you is we know that we're getting this much space back. We used to track all of these stats. We're like, what's empty? What's vacant? What's the vacant and available module? You know, what is that? What does that little sliver tell you? Like, it doesn't look good. We have like 400,000 feet for sublet, which means it's leased to me. I'm collecting rent, but there is a ticking clock on this thing, right? So there's the vacant, there's the available, and whatever the hell else might be going on. 96%, like I don't believe, I haven't seen those stats in 5 years. I just don't believe it.
Okay. So I told Kyle that we had to have you because I actually know you.
Yeah.
And I know that you're really charismatic. You're able to talk freely. And one of the prime reasons that I thought it'd be really interesting to talk to you was because you've had like this crazy arc of going from being an eat what you kill, like proper broker in the leasing world, to then going into the development world, a large scale with Canderel, then going at the prima donna of the whole province in Ivanhoé Cambridge, and then now you're at Bertone, which is private development.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like kind of rare to talk to someone that's been in all of those seats and can kind of like point out the flaws and point out the good points.
Yeah.
And so that's my kind of like high level reason why I thought it'd be interesting to kind of pick your brain. And already, like, we're just sitting down and you're just going right into it. So it's amazing.
Look, I'm flattered, like it's my arc. Not that I've ever really considered it an arc. It's sort of like, it's by history. I don't find it particularly special. It's nice to think other people think like this is unique or worth listening to. A lot of it is so accidental, but I think there's a lot to be said about, what do you do when these things happen to you? Like, I'll tell you very specifically, I was on my way to go work for a bank in Toronto when I was a mama's boy. I really didn't want to leave Montreal. And one of my finance professors called my best friend and said, hey, is anybody here looking for a job? Because I know a guy who's looking for a guy in real estate. That was the way the conversation was.
How old were you at the time?
23.
So just out of school?
Just out of school. And by the way, nobody rushed to finish school because you don't know anything and you don't know anybody and nobody's listening to you at 23. Not in real estate anyway. So I tell my kids, don't rush. Like, there's plenty of time. So I call the guy. I got to call him like 40 times. For a guy that was really interested in hiring somebody, he really wasn't giving me any sort of like love and attention.
Which firm was this?
This is Devencore.
Okay.
And so I'm calling a guy by the name of Tom Granger, who at the time was like, widely considered like a crazy entrepreneurial deal maker, wonderful personality, fast, does a lot of stuff at the same time. All true, terrible manager, because he's that kind of guy. It doesn't mean necessarily you're going to be a great manager, but still a lot to learn. Anyway, so I call him like, without exaggeration, 40 times, finally get a call back. I interview, it goes well. I interview with the managing director, Alfredo, which I still consider a mentor. I meet Jean-Laurent. Like, if you've worked in real estate in Montreal, you know who all these people are. They hire me, right? So I say to Alfredo, I said, what's with this guy? Okay, like 40 times at the call, like, what's going on? And he's like, dude, it was a test. In our business, if you're going to give up after somebody doesn't call you back because you've called them a handful of times, this is not for you. So you passed the first test. Okay, I didn't know it was being Miyagi'd at the time, but that's what was.
I love that.
Right? Like, that's the way it went down. So I was like, okay. And so, met a bunch of cool people there. I remember going up to their first retreat. It was 1997. And the guy comes to pick me up at my house, my parents' duplex, which they still own in the East End of Montreal. Very senior broker, Joe DiBiase. He looks at me, he looks at my mom, he says, your son just won the lottery. And she's like, my mom's like, doesn't have confidence in anybody, right? So I was like, oh, that's nice. Whatever. What the hell does that mean? So then we're in the car. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, how could you say this to my mom? It's like, Peter, the quality of people that you're going to meet and the types of things you're going to get to work on. Like, I'm telling you, you just won the lottery. Okay. Right. Like, this was normal for them. So I did the brokerage thing for 6 years. It was tough. right? Like, it's tough to make money outside of like, within the first 5 years when you're starting out as a kid, it's tough. Like, if I was starting today, it would be a different story because you have relationships, you have some experience, a little bit of gray hair, a bit of bald hair. You're like, "Oh, this guy might know something about a deal," or
He knows numbers.
he knows numbers, he knows something, right? He learned something. Look at him, he's old enough to have learned something, but as a kid, it's tough. And, we at the time, we were sort of servicing a very narrow piece of the market. We were very specifically doing, like, tenant representation, and I used to see all these other guys in the business doing all kinds of other things, and I thought, "This is not for me." You know, like, I would like to do more than what we are actually, doing here, and but still, I have, like, 20 some odd years later, that place was bought by Avis Young. I have a lot of amazing relationships there still. I love them all, and they had some great mentors while I was there, Phil O'Brien and Jean Lorrain. Like, it was just an incredible experience.
Was there any habits that they taught you to build up your business?
Absolutely. It was, and I took this with me later on, and he ultimately shared it with other people, was just sort of like, you have to be A, organized, B, you have to be persistent, and you can't waste time looking like you're busy, because everybody, as a young broker, you want to be busy, but it doesn't mean it's productive. So you have to be doing productive things. And at the time, that meant business development, cold call, cold call, cold call, hot call, warm call, like walk into buildings, knock on doors. You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. We didn't call it that at the time. It was just sort of like they throw you in the deep end and go do these things in terms of business development. Like if I walked in at 23 to the Chambre de Commerce, like, that's not a great environment for me because who is this kid? This guy doesn't know anything. Oh, he's a guy at one of these firms. That got easier later, but you still have to go. Like, those meetings at the beginning are very uncomfortable. You walk into the room and you don't know anybody or really much else. You've just started.
The conferences and the cocktails.
Conferences and the cocktails, like,
I still feel that way right now. Like, I dread the moment when these things happen,
yeah,
but then once I'm done, I see the value in it. So it's kinda like ripping off a Band-Aid.
it
But
is.
you're like, you take it off and you're like, "Okay, this is a
But
good thing."
I said something to my daughter's boyfriend a couple of years ago. He was looking for advice. He's still in university. And I said to him, look, just say yes more than you say no. He says, what do you mean? I said, it's always going to be easier to be like, I'm busy. I don't want to do this thing. I don't feel like it. I'm uncomfortable. I said, my experience is if you go, if you decide to participate, there'll be a benefit. I can't tell you exactly what it'll be, but something will transpire at that event in the preparation or in the aftermath that's going to be beneficial to your development. It might not be the actual event. Rarely is it. Like you go to the conference and the best part of the conference is happening in the hallways between the actual presentations because people are a bit more candid. They have more time for you. They're a bit more relaxed. You can have a real conversation, get somebody's, name, email, whatever. Being back in the classroom environment, with 400 other people at a conference is like, you'll learn some stuff, but you're not going to advance any of your relationships.
Mhm,
And that's where the real value in those things comes. So I said, just say yes more often than you say no.
mhm.
Now, when I walk into these events, I hate them for other reasons, but I know everybody. They all know me. You're like, I really should be doing something else. But there's always something amazing that comes from it because you're all basically there for the same reasons, right? People want to do business with people they trust, people that are reliable, people that they know are worth their word. The reason you feel uncomfortable is because you haven't done it long enough. Like it takes a while to get like, I'm down, like I know I'm gonna walk in and there's like 14 people that I recognize instantaneously. It's easier in Montreal than it is in Toronto because it's bigger and there are fewer people.
Mm.
The ones they're kind of more dispersed, but it took time.
Yeah,
It took time, and it's a lot to ask of a of a of a young university graduate. I can't even imagine what it might be like today. You hear that everybody's sort of like so into their phones that they forget how to talk to one another. Like, let me tell you, that's the key to the business. If you can't talk to other people, you're gonna have a hard time.
me, the name tag check. So it's like they come up, it's not a known name,
Moving on.
next.
Yeah.
And then so it's kind of funny because the bigger the name on your name tag, the relative weight of that person is probably the least. Nobody thinks about that, right? So if it's we're in Ivanhoé Cambridge, you kind of go, oh, big important company. Let me talk to him.
Yeah.
But having interacted with that organization, it's huge committees, and it's like, you're far from an answer from a huge organization.
Well, it depends who you've met, but
yeah. But I'm just saying, like, if you kind of go, oh, JLL, okay, there could be 300 people at JLL, whereas like a small private, that conversation might be worth something, but the kind of name check, I see that they look at the thing and they kind of go, I don't know what it is.
yeah, you go like, my eyes are up here.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But that's also, I think, one of your strengths. Like, I interacted with you and I knew not much about real estate. I knew about activating spaces.
yeah,
Right. We spoke when talking about PVM, and you're someone who's really good at connecting folks. And I think that's one of your strong suits. And I don't have any scientific evidence, but whenever you do make an announcement online, like, you just see the hundreds of people that have a good relationship with you. And so I was just always kind of curious, like, how do you keep up with all of these connections?
I'm not as good at it as I should be. But that's a failing I have. Like, that's just like, there's not enough time in the day. I think, I mean, look, I've been in the business for 29 years in some form or fashion. We're all connected in some form or fashion. I suspect that people would say a few different things about me. And I think one of the things they'd say is like, he's a good egg. Fundamentally, this is not somebody who's going to either try to, screw you or lie to you, or so probably that makes it easier,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, by the way, I've grown as a person. I surely wasn't at 25 or 30 or 35 the same type of leader that I am today. And I'm lucky, like I learned for so many years from so many amazing people that, um, it's like it takes a generation, really, to make people feel like, yeah, okay, it's relatively predictable. It's Peter. He's reliable. He's not going to call you back on the same day, but he will call you back. Like, I'm not one of these, I'm going to call you back in an hour. I've never been that guy. I'm sure that people still waiting for a return phone call for you. But they know I'm getting to you, right?
We're getting back to you.
We're getting back to you. It's going to happen. I swear. Um, is it because I'm the youngest of four brothers and you have to fight for your attention, and I'm like a quintessentially, yes, you're the last born kid in the family, so that's your personality? I don't know, maybe, you know? I genuinely enjoy what I do in real estate. Mostly I enjoy the people, right? Because if it's just spreadsheets or just the box, I call them boxes all the time. That's less fun for me.
The
Like,
box is the building.
the real estate. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, the people are what bring it to life. They're what gives it its soul, its raison d'être, I
Mhm.
believe, right? Um, Other than that, it's like, it's a box. Like, what is it really? I mean, it could be beautiful, but there's no spirit in there. There's
Brick,
no
cement,
soul.
and an elevator.
Glass. Yeah. Even the coolest spaces, like, if there are no people to make it what it feels like, then it's just not the same thing,
Mhm.
you know?
So when you were out in the brokerage world and they kind of made you hit the ground and cold call and all that, uh, you brought that the next place you were at, Canderel, and then for the rest of your career. One thing that came back from feedback, because I'm the younger generation, and there's even a younger generation under me. But one of the things that came back through my interactions going around was how you've coached a lot of people,
Hmm.
because you've been in this like manager mentor position. And so one of the examples that kind of like struck me as like a really good lesson was my friend Miriam, who worked with you at,
She's on my list. You told me to think about this, and she's on my list. I
yeah.
can't wait to hear what she said.
So and this is not like for this conversation. This is like literally like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, Peter. And then she was like, oh yeah, I loved working with Peter. And she's like, Peter, I don't know if it was at her internship or at the start of her job, but she's like, he would make us go and collect business cards, and we would need to come back at the end of the day with like, I came back with like 4 business cards, and he was like, this is garbage. You need like 20.
Yeah.
Like, you need to like step your business card game up. And for us, like, collecting business cards, I don't even know if I have a business card, but like the
Yeah.
point was, show me proof that you've talked to someone
That's right.
and come back to the office. And she tells me this, and I'm like, okay, so what do you do? And then she was like I literally would go into an office building and go to every office tenant
Yeah.
and then just ask them like, when is your lease coming up? Can I speak to someone? And she's like, well, sometimes, conversation wasn't really to the right person, but I'd come back with a business card,
Yeah,
prove that I had it.
yeah.
So that was like one example, but was that like your thing? Was that the
Look, it could take any number of forms, but my thing was really what I was trying to get these people to understand in my own way was you got to get past being uncomfortable because your threshold for uncomfortable will change as soon as you get comfortable with this thing that used to make you uncomfortable, right? And so with Miriam, I thought that's what she needed, and she did great. Like she did not want to go get 14 business cards from building X. I think that dealing with rejection in our world is super important and something that I had to do as a broker. It's easy to get complacent when you get on the landlord side. The paycheck comes every 2 weeks. How hard are you working? It's a very, very different environment to be successful in both. And so I was very lucky, right? Like having spent 6 years in brokerage, I got a lot of great lessons from these sharks at the time. They all look like untouchable for me. Like, am I ever going to be like these guys? And I left because for two reasons. One, I wasn't great at it.
Mhm.
And I could not deal with sometimes, even though you do everything right, the thing doesn't work. I had a client once collapse in my arms in his office because he had recently had some surgery and he insisted on having a meeting regardless. And a few days later, the guy passed away. And a person who took over the responsibility said to me, like, listen, I know you've been working on this thing for a few months, but we have an office in the US and typically we'd have to get a mandate through that firm. So we can't give you a mandate and we're going to go our separate ways. And my $60,000 commission went kapoof. Did everything right. Had a great relationship. Guy died. Like, it's awful,
Yeah.
awful. And so I was like, you know what? I need to go to an environment where I'm going to do more, but I can't deal with this uncertainty. But I left there with a profound and deep respect for what it is these people do.
You also didn't leave after 8 months.
No.
You stayed there 6 years,
Yeah.
which for younger generations sounds like a lifetime.
Yeah, I know. But and look, at the time, people thought like it's just about to get good. Why are you leaving? Because it's widely known. The first 5 years suck. When you're a kid, it sucks in that world because you got to learn how it gets done. You have to build the relationships. You have to know what all these clauses mean in an offer and a lease. So like l'apprentissage, like your apprenticeship is sort of like it's a really, really hockey stick shaped curve. And our family, they're immigrants from southern Italy in the 60s. We didn't come here with relationships or family office connections or money. So like you're really starting from zero. It takes time.
Mhm.
And so the first 5 years are known. I'm not a quitter. Okay. Like this is not something I've ever done in my life. So it sucked, but I was surrounded by good people. And, I felt like I owed them something in terms of, they helped me out for the first couple of years. At the time, they were even paying very small base salaries to make sure nobody disappeared. And I think I earned my keep, but, I wasn't experiencing like the most successful year I had was the last one, and it was the only one. Like, the other ones were all, like, earning, like, a salary, but you're going crazy. I remember at one point thinking, "I will not have a cell phone. I don't care what's happening. I'm not gonna I want my work-life balance. I'm not gonna have a cell phone." I said those words out loud, okay, in, like, the late '90s. That went out the window very fast. It's like saying, "No, we're not putting air conditioning in our building," or, "We're not gonna use AI. We're not gonna use a calculator." Like, that's how dumb some of those things are, but you're young, and you're like, "No, this is not gonna be me," right? So, but I wanted to do more. And so I took with me all of the lessons that I saw make other people be successful, even if I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be because I'd been at it just less time. And for sure, I had to develop the discipline. Like I didn't show up as a 23-year-old and have like the regimented discipline that you require on day one. No, I got my ass kicked a few times from the managing director and a couple of clients, and you learn. And so when I went to Canderel,
So now at that point, you're like 30 and you've been in the boot camp with the Sharks. So
yeah,
now you're transitioning to call it, I'm going to say it that way, correct me if I'm wrong, but like private development adjacent to institutional money, like large scale private.
I was very, look, again, in 1990, so I started in 97. By the time I left, it was the end of '02. Like I literally started in January of '03. And I have an amazing story to tell you about the quality of people that are there. So for the 6 years I was in brokerage, it was widely known if you want to get an MBA in real estate, you go work for Canderel. That's what people said. Like, this guy is a machine. This guy is brilliant. This whole team is brilliant. They've all been there like a decade plus. He's been through cycles. Like, if you want to know, you want to learn how to do real estate, you go work for
This guy being John Wiener?
You go work for Jonathan Wiener, right? And it's the singular piece of advice I would give to anybody out there who's trying to figure out how to get good at what you're doing. Go work for the biggest hard ass you can find that will be demanding. I know it's counterintuitive because you're like, I want work-life balance. I want this, I want that. But if you want to get good at your craft, go work for somebody who works really hard and is really demanding. And for 20 years, that's what I did. I worked for a couple of the biggest, most demanding people that you could find in Montreal real estate. Like, they're the champs as far as I'm concerned. And so, of course, it's going to have an impact, right? Like,
I feel like you just made me a recruitment video.
okay, I want fee. No, but look, of course I couldn't know this when I was 23, right?
When did you figure out that being with someone demanding was kind of fast tracking your growth?
Only after I got there and felt like I was drowning for many, many months. And I remember John Wiener coming to me and he did to me, he's like, it's a muscle. He's like, you'll get used to it. Eventually you'll feel what's making you drown now will no longer make you feel like you're drowning. You just haven't worked that muscle, he would say to me, you know? And so he caught me at my desk once having lunch. He's like, what are you doing here? He's like, you got to be out at least 4 or 5 times a week. Between lunch and dinner, breakfast, you have to be meeting people constantly. I know you're busy. You could do this later. You can't be having lunch at your desk. This is helping no one. I'm paraphrasing, but this was the sentiment, you know? So, like, of course, anybody that I mentored later on, I'd be like, what are you doing? Having lunch at your desk? Like, I didn't create all these innovative ideas. I had the benefit of having stood on the shoulders of giants. Like, it's John Wiener and Bill Tresham and Dan Fournier in Montreal. Like, I didn't invent anything. Plus, they have to want to do it. You know, Miriam, to her great credit, took off at some point and went to start her own construction business. Like, you got to be made of solid stuff. I'm glad I may have contributed a little bit along the way, but I was just trying to say, hey, listen, this was my path to success. Take from it whatever you think might work for you. And there's been a bunch of people that have done sort of like amazing things, but you have to want to do it. It's not because you had a great mentor that you'll be successful. And I was very lucky to have a bunch of great ones. Like, I remember one time, you know, we did this Bell Campus project. It's 20 years ago. I can't believe it. We'd been preparing for so long.
Bell Campus in Ile-des-Sœurs?
In Ile-des-Sœurs.
Yeah.
Like, team effort, okay? Big group, big by Canderel stands. We're like 6, 7 people working on this project. And it's the day before the presentation. And around 6, 7, like John was already gone. 6, 7, my boss goes home. You know, 8, 9, a couple of other people go home. We're having calls all night, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then it's like me and my assistant, Jackie, we have to prepare the book for the meeting the next morning. And we were there till 4 in the morning, got it all ready, just pure exhaustion. Time to go home, slept an hour, came back. I used to live in Laval back in the day. And we're like, are we ready? You know, we're ready. Like, you're excited. You're like, you're buzzing. Your body is vibrating. We go to the meeting. The meeting goes exceptionally well. You never really know, but it went about as well as it could go. And so we walk out of the meeting, and Dan Peretz, who's like also one of the top 5 smartest real estate people in the country, he lobs one up. Like, I could tell he was like lobbing it up for John to give us a compliment. He's like, John, you know, team worked very hard. Peter and Jackie were at the office till like 4, 4:30 in the morning. And, you know, it's a big thanks to them that we could, you know. And John's like, it's great. Thanks, guys. That was fantastic. But for sure, if we'd have prepared better, you wouldn't have had to do that. So I was cursing him inside my brain for like a long time. For like, that's not what I wanted to hear. It's only with a little bit of perspective later. He's right. Of course he's right. He's always fucking right. Like, because he's been there before, you know. And so I thought about it just in mathematical terms. Had I spent maybe an extra hour a day for the last couple of weeks, I for sure wouldn't have had to stay till 4 in the morning at the office. Like, he was right. I didn't think so in the moment. Like, in the moment, I wanted to be like, why can't you just say, hey, great, you know?
Yeah.
But he's doing you a favor by fucking pushing you hard. You know, you want to be like low, then here's some candy. Like you could get that, but that's not, he wants more for you. And so that's why he's pushing you this way. So that's why I was the way I was with Pat, with David, with Phil, with Miriam, with Avi. Like these people have gone on to do amazing things. Avi was MD at CB for 6, 7 years. He's now running a development business. Miriam started her own company. Pat is now running all of the leasing for Colliers at PVM and others. He wasn't involved when we were there together, so there's like a whole new level of success for him. David went on and did great things with Broccolini. Then he did some amazing deals with Rosefellow. Like, I'm sure at some point those guys and gals closed the door and went like, he's such a fucking asshole, you know? But if you ask them today, they may still say that, but they'll be like, for sure, you know, he treated us fair and he helped, right? But you have to want to take the
I have a question though. Are
advice.
there moments when you were tough that you were kind of hesitating between softening up or sticking to your guns?
Yes. And you don't always get it right.
How do you deal with that? How do you make the decision?
You know, you go back to your office, you look in the mirror, you, at least for me anyway, not that there was a mirror in my office, but just sort of sitting there going, did I do the right thing? Right. And it's, the answer is not always the same for everybody. You know, you have to take into consideration, you know, where are they in their life? Where are they today compared to the last several months? Where are they on their arc of success? You know, are we having a good year? Are we having a bad year? What else is going on in their life? I was always keen to be aware. I actually have always genuinely cared about people. I think people sense that. Like, it's not a facade because I like people.
Hmm.
And you're there in the trenches with you, like 8, 10, 12, 14, sometimes more per day. I'm genuinely interested in what's going on in their lives. And sometimes you have to realize you can't have the same answer for everybody. You got to soften it for this guy, maybe a bit tougher for that person. Um, and you're not going to get it right every time. And that sucks because you never really want to hurt anybody. You're really just trying to get them to be successful. You're sharing what's been shared with you, what worked for you.
Hmm.
But, you know, sometimes it's easy to forget there's a gap, you know, like when I was age X, they were all significantly younger than me. So, you know, what was easy for me to do and the advice I could imbibe to them was like, well, how are they taking this? You know, Miriam is not at the same stage of life as I am. How do I take this into consideration? And this person and that person and that person. And it's funny. It's what, one of the things that was at Ivanhoe we were sort of like reflecting upon when we were trying to figure out how to do our workplace 2.0. It was, they were saying, statistics were telling us like it's never have we had this many generations of people inside the office. You know, like we had people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s,
Yeah.
and they don't all get managed the same way. So of course there are going to be some skirmishes. I think if people recognize that you mean well and that you can actually have a conversation, notwithstanding what just was said, like they know that you can go talk, which I often did, then I think it goes down better. And, you know, my attitude was always, as a manager, my job is to try and make your job easier. I can shine light on some stuff. I can have, you know, access to people to, you know, get us some resources or some support. It should not, I mean, my role is not to make your life more miserable. My job is to help you succeed. And I will be the battering ram when the shit hits the fan,
Hmm.
you know? But if they don't feel legitimately like you're including them as part of that success, then you're not going to get the best out of people. They'll be like, this is a job. Okay. So I'm going to punch the clock and I'm going to do whatever and move on. But because we were always in business development mode, whether it was acquisitions, dispositions, or leasing, these are very particular type of people to begin with, right?
Hmm.
It's not like we're going to kindergarten and say, I want you to do this. They're here by choice. They want to do business, which you know it's going to be hard. You know there's going to be inertia. It's always easier to do nothing than to make something happen. And those are not the kinds of people that end up in leasing or in acquisition. So part of it is pre-baked, but you still don't always get it right. And I've made mistakes.
Question though, when you're pushing your folks and training them, basically, how do you how would you conclude, let's say, this is worth pursuing, or you know what, maybe it's not the right fit. Let me cut bait. Did you ever have those
Yeah,
choices?
it is the worst part of being in business is making that decision. But better to make it fast than to prolong the agony, right? Like, it's just not good for morale of those that are still around if you have somebody that's not working out for whatever reason,
And
right?
how can you tell that they're not working out?
Uh, when your values don't align or the results don't follow, like I'm very mindful of effort doesn't always equal result. Very mindful because you can still do everything right and it doesn't work. But if you can see that their effort isn't there, the accountability isn't there, there's always another reason for something else being not the way it's supposed to be. Well, that's not the type of person you want, not the type of DNA you want in an organization. Like, I know things are going to sometimes not go our way, but what are we doing to try and, make this turn in our favor, in our direction? And sometimes you can't. And then you're making a judgment call on how much more do we invest in this person to try and to try and get them to be where it is we want them to be. But generally speaking, it's quite obvious. For me, anyways, there's always been like, this is not a good fit. If you can ask once, you can ask twice. I've never had a short fuse in terms of giving people chances to see, can they get there, And most times I thought it was very, very easy. Like, it hasn't happened a lot. Um, it's still never fun though. There's still people at the end of the day that go home to families and, they've just been repudiated by their boss for all the good reasons, but it's like, it's not a good fit, and I have a fiduciary responsibility to the people I work for, to the team, to the people that own the stuff that we are managing, depending on where it is you're working.
I think what changed my perspective was when I can't remember who, but someone I spoke to in the last year, he told me, you have to stop relating to it as your friends or people that you've grown to like. You need to think about it as a hockey team. And if you're not scoring the goals and you're not getting the result, are you doing them a favor putting them on the first line, or do you need to change the lineup?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was something that I was really curious to pick your brain on. Pivoting, I want to talk about office
Huh.
because to me, um, you put together kind of a renaissance of an office project with PVM. And years later, we have COVID, we have all these things happening. And now you still have, you know, a bigger problem with office, which you addressed in a world where there wasn't this working from home dynamic and kind of like a whole shift in generational work from home balance and boundaries. And so I was just curious, like in general, um, what would be your commentary on Office right now? I spoke to you at, let's say, 6 months ago. Your
Yeah.
Transat building had come online.
Yeah.
It's gonna transact soon, but I think it came on during the summer. And the first person I was like, "Hey, I wonder what Peter thinks about Office," and I gave you a call. I'd like to, like, bring that forward since you've had a lot of experience in Office and you've told me the ups and downs of trying to attract these law firms and all that. How has it changed, and what's your comment on it? How do you see it?
Look, I think it's gotten way tougher than it ever was. I have a lot of empathy for folks that bought an office building in the 5 years before the pandemic. We were on a high, things were headed in the right direction, but the paradigm just completely changed, you know? So, we've heard a lot about bifurcation, like if you're in the triple A's, it's going great, but if you're not, it's going terrible. As usual, I think the story is a bit deeper than that, and it's not the same story for everybody, but I do believe these days, like if you are not prepared, to properly amenitize your building and spend big money, you're gonna suffer. Like, it's going to be bad. I think it's gonna get worse before it gets better. We're sitting here almost 6 years to the day, the anniversary of when the shutdown happened in the spring of 2020. No one could foresee that office buildings would still be half empty at the time. Like, oh, we're gonna be home for a couple of weeks. Let's see what happens. Like yeah, then the curfew, then the stay home, then all that stuff. Like, I think you're not hearing about the very, very deep pockets of pain if you are, generic building X on street Y that isn't one of the main arteries in Montreal. And I think that's true across main town or mainland North America. regardless of where your office building is. There's this massive struggle to get people back to the office. Um, had we had this chat a few months ago, I'd be more pessimistic. But now I'm hearing that the banks are telling all their employees by the end of the summer or the fall, it's minimum 4 days. And the feds are doing the same thing. It's minimum this many days in the office. But just a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to an old colleague about how I missed the energy of downtown.
Mhm.
I work for an amazing company. I'm getting to do fantastic things at Bertone in terms of the multifamily development business, which I'm learning, which is amazing. But my office is in Ville Saint Laurent, a huge change from the downtown core.
Mhm.
And the guy says to me, he says, "Yeah, man, it's nowhere near what it was still." I said, "Really?" He says, "Yeah." He's like, "Maybe 1 or 2 days a week, you'll feel that kind of energy." He's like, "But we are still not back."
Mhm.
So, the people vote with their feet in their wallets. Like it's not back. So I think if you're like the best in class asset, and they're not 50 of them in Montreal, you could pick them all off and with two hands.
Mhm.
Those other guys are having a hard time. Like we were talking before we started filming, I think about the guys that just bought Les Cours Montréal, the office tower. You look at what they pay for that asset. You're like, how is that possible? Well, that's what happens when you look forward and say, I'm going to have to put $200 a foot to get this building to where it needs to be to maybe generate a rent of what? And so how many years are you projecting forward? So I think it's going to be bad for a very long time for anybody that doesn't have the wherewithal to commit. Now, if you have a half-empty building, your building is paid for, pretty patient. If you have a half-empty building or 25, it doesn't need to be half. If you have 25% vacancy and you have a mortgage coming due, there's going to be a lot of arrangements being made. The banks don't want them back. There was a time when they had all these buildings and they're like, we don't want to, we don't want this. It's not their core business. For a long time, people treated office buildings like they were bonds. They're not bonds. Okay, they need capex every year. They need money in some form or fashion to stay, in line with what it is people have in terms of expectations. And now people have tasted work from home, which I think is an excellent tool to have in the box. I'm not one of these people that believes the rules should be the same for everybody. Like, I think if you're a caregiver, whether it's for a young family or for an older person, you get some sort of dispensation. We can figure that out. But to think that I'm going to run my business and my employers will agree, but a lot of my colleagues won't. If somebody said to me like, "Yeah, we're going to run our business, we're going to be in the office like twice a week," I'd be like, "I quit. I can't. You can't be in the real estate business and genuinely believe that it's going to be better if people do it remote." There's a lot of value for the human being to work from home, without question. Is some of that value coming to the employer? Probably. Is enough of it coming back to the employer? I doubt it.
Mhm.
Because at lunchtime, when I'm at home, I'm not meeting anybody. I'm doing fucking laundry.
Mhm.
I'm mowing the lawn. Great for Peter because I have more free time on the weekend. But zero value for the company other than to believe I have a happy Peter, therefore I'm going to get a more productive Peter and he's going to be a more loyal and more sticky. I don't know how much that's true. And the banks, right, like they're starting to come back because they realize, you know what, it's not all it's cracked up to be. Because real estate is not cheap, right? Like it's not cheap. And yet they're coming back in droves and some of them gave so much of it back, they're going to need more of it. But that story is not going to be the same for everybody across the country. Banks want to be in because they're keen to get their people back, the best buildings, the most amenitized buildings, the most centralized buildings, which is great for those. But what happens to the C class?
Yeah, so Class A is at 96% occupancy.
What? No way.
Well, that's the headline rate.
Bullshit. Bullshit. It might be 96%, but what they're not telling you is we know that we're getting this much space back. We used to track all of these stats. We're like, what's empty? What's vacant? What's the vacant and available module? What is that? What was that little sliver tell you? Like, it doesn't look good. We have like 400,000 feet for sublet, which means it's leased to me. I'm collecting rent, but there is a ticking clock on this thing, right? So there's the vacant, there's the available, and whatever the hell else might be going on. 96%, like I don't believe, I haven't seen those stats in 5 years. I just don't believe it. It's hardly likely to be possible. Now, could that be true in 5 years? Because so many people gave up so much space that they have to sort of like pedal backwards and be like, finally we need it back. Maybe. It wasn't in 96 before the pandemic. How can it be 90? There's no way. No way. No one will convince me that that's true.
So you don't see a flight to quality where quality A buildings are surviving and thriving, and then B and C are in the dump.
I do see that.
But A thriving or not thriving?
A, thriving for sure,
Okay.
but the depth of the market in Montreal is such that there's not that many people that want to do that bifurcation.
Mhm.
Okay. On a long-term basis, these are my thoughts. A very wise man said to me once, the office leasing market in Montreal is like walking on your knees on crushed glass. And that's when the market is good. Okay. And I quote George Gerasimo, okay, another amazing mentor of mine. Because once you've been at it for a couple of cycles, you know, right? In Montreal, we are not New York. Okay. We are not like, we love to have, look at my address, look at this prestige. Here, it's a little bit more like, we don't want to brag about the success that we're having. We're going to be a bit more low key. Culturally speaking, this is one of the differences I saw between Toronto, New York, Montreal. You talk to your colleagues in these towns, and they're like, no, they want to be at the Trade Center or they want to be at Bryant Park because this is meaningful and people are proud and we want to wear that as a badge of honor. Here, there's a lot more tenants that don't care. They're like, it's an office, so we're going to get like a middling place because what does it mean? Now, I'm sure some of that is going to have to pivot because if you want them back in the office, you better have something to offer.
Mhm.
And what the offering needs to be, I think, is still evolving, will continue to evolve. And it means different things to different people. Like I'm 52, my kids are adults. My needs on a day-to-day basis when I go to work are not the same needs as a 22-year-old or somebody who has a young family or somebody who's taking care of somebody with Alzheimer's. Like there's a lot of needs that are common. And I think there's ways to address some of those things to make the office um, easier to go to. Like you're basically telling everybody, I'd like to avoid the second stop.
Mhm.
Okay, if I have to go somewhere, I would like to avoid the second stop. Like I think there should be daycares all over the place. This is like, if you want mom and dad to come to the office, solve this problem for me. It's a small price to pay, but everybody falls in love with this. The underwriting says this, said the value would be that, would only be empty this long. The daycare can't pay their rent. And the model we sort of took many, many years ago was to say, look, what is, from a more holistic approach, what is the benefit to this asset if we make this decision, which on its own doesn't make a lot of economic sense, but on balance is the right thing to do because it will make like economic sense. And never a better example than this wonderful little coffee shop we did for Maison Manuvie. Okay. We had an institutional partner, very similar to us. It took a long time to get them to agree that it was better for us to take a smaller rent on 1,000-foot space in a building that's 500,000 feet, but there would be the place people would sort of gravitate to because they didn't want a generic chain restaurant in a prestige A-class building. And Anne-Marie Hubert, I love her, at EY, when we were negotiating the deal for the 4 floors that they ultimately occupied in Maison Manuvie, she's like, you're not going to give me some like shitty coffee shop in the lobby, are you? I'm like, no, we will not do that. So it was clear because she knew the quality of people she had in her organization and the people she was asking to come to work every day pre-pandemic. She's like, we can get the generic stuff. Like the building is over a mall. There's plenty of, services in the mall. There's plenty of services on St. Catherine and McGill and Mansfield.
And get any MTY.
You'll get anything you want. I want something cool in the building. It's counterintuitive. You're like, why aren't we getting the best possible rent in the building, even for the last 1,000 square foot? They're like, well, because it'll help you get a better tenant profile with the people that are coming above. And then maybe one of the nicest compliments as an organization we ever got, we had a guy in from Heinz, and so he was meeting me at the coffee shop in the building, and he was parking inside the parking at Maison Manuvie, and there the parking is on a podium, so it's above the ground floor. And so the elevator takes you down to the lobby. And he says, after meeting me in the lobby, he's like, this is the nicest arrival from a parking garage to the lobby of a building I've seen in North America. Heinz. Because the elevator door opens, smells like coffee, there's a little bit of music playing, there's a little bit of energy, you can smell some of the food being baked in the morning. They would bake everything on site. And so like, we were right. Not my decision, my recommendation, because you're listening to your client who's saying, please don't shit this up for me, okay? Like we're making a big decision by consolidating and coming to your new building. They're telling you what they want. They're telling you the answer. It's an exam, but they're telling you the answer.
Mhm.
So if you say, no, I want to do generic coffee A, they're pissed at you from day one. Like they're literally thinking like, why?
So you gotta be okay with forgoing absolute NOI with amenitizing and using those small tenancies as an amenity, as adding culture, community.
Yeah, and the other thing you have to do is don't lie to yourself about what'll happen if you don't. Okay? Like anybody who's ever been in a room where you're modeling your Argus to figure out, okay, what are the cash flows of this property if we do X, Y, and Z, nobody likes to put the amount of time, the downtime that you're actually going to face if you don't do the right thing, right? You're sort of looking at your cash flow, say, well, it'll be a few months, 3, 6, 9. Listen, the truth is that number is rarely that low in Montreal when the market is like stable. We're not even in a stable market. So for us, we're lucky. We didn't have to sacrifice the NOI because we still had some lease up left in the building and we more than made it all back. Like we had 60, 80,000 feet left. What did I need? Like a quarter to make, not even to make up the loss or the discount. We got a fair rent, but it's not what we wanted when we underwrote the project, 10 years before.
Yeah, this is a mom and pop. Like,
Yeah. Like we were not planning to do a mom and pop because it's going to be an amazing amenity for the whole building. Nobody thought that. But having evolved through what we went through with PVM and what we were looking to do and what we were seeing was happening in the rest of the world, you're like, this is pre-pandemic. But even then we're saying things like, yeah, you really need to amenitize these buildings properly to get people to want to be here, right? People are Instagramming their breakfast. Like,
for two identical buildings, office or multifamily, two identical buildings, same capex, same built, same vintage. I love the word vintage, by the way. What can make one building stand out versus the other one?
when you walk in, you want to be there.
What makes you want to be there?
Listen, to me, it's all about the feeling you get when you're in this building. For me, it's one set of things. For somebody else, it might be another set of things. So for me, if I'm walking into a building, I want the smell. Okay. Like if it smells nice, I already want to be here more than in the other one. If it's actually properly clean, if there's a human being who's like ready to talk to you, even if they don't talk to you, but that is as a pleasant disposition, if there is a place to have a real coffee, Italian roots, so it can't start a day without having some form of caffeine injected into me. Not just for the caffeine, for the opportunity to have this social interaction, right? Now I'm 52. If I had a kid that needed to go to daycare and I walked into the building and the daycare is like over there, like, yeah, okay, like 100%, I would rather be in the building that has this thing for me and this other thing for me. And it's easy to move in this building. Like one of the things that frustrated me to no end, because, we did a lot of things, but we ran out of time and you can't do everything. I park in the building every day and I go to the same floor every day, but I need to whip out one access card to get it waved into the friggin' building. Then I need another access card to get me to my floor. Like I think the tech is advanced enough now that I like, it's Peter. We have him on camera. We know he parks here. We know he always goes to the 20th floor. The thing should light up when I show up in the lobby, right? So the more of these resistance points you remove, of course, the easier it'll be, right? Like I don't want to waste 42 seconds waiting for an elevator in the lobby. And so if I feel this way, I'm sure there's thousands of other people that feel this way, like every day, this is my trajet, right?
Mhm.
So fulfilling some of those needs, and to find out what those needs are, you have to talk to your customer. And in office, for a long time, we weren't great at talking to our customer. Plus, your customer doesn't always know what they want.
Mhm.
We did a bunch of geofencing studies to figure out what we should do at PVM. The things that came back, none of them were like, we need a food hall. Like it didn't happen. People didn't say that. So you have to sift through that data. You got to look what's happening around the world. How do you make people happy? The shitty ones spend 7 hours a day there, right? The ones that really go through the wall for you, they're there 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 hours. You ask them, what's it going to take for you to come here? What would make the difference for you? They'll tell you. And you have to figure out how to monetize it. And there's a bunch of different ways, right? So for me, it's all about How do I feel when I walk into this building?
And I guess the biggest impact, if it's not pure CapEx of, let's say, having the tech tool to never have to take a badge out, it's just having the people and the operations that actually care.
Yes, it's funny, it's easy to romanticize why a building is successful, but I can tell you why they start to fall apart. When the attitude of the operational people on the ground is not where you need it to be, and I do believe that today it does need to be like hospitality level, it's the beginning of the decline, right? Because it's instead of being greeted with a smile and a kind word, instead of being supremely clean, the environment, people start to like chintz a little bit. And those things, like the death is not fast. It's slow because our leases tend to be 5, 10, 15 years, but the impact is enormous. When they finally got fed up, like then it's the sudden break, the vacancy. But the decline is gradual. And the smartest people in the business, they know this. Okay. And I learned it in 2003 when we were hired by King Set, which at the time was called King Street. They had to change their name. They hired Canderel to do the property management and leasing of their Place du Canada building. And there was a lot of consternation in my office about like, are we going to tell them the truth about what it's going to take to lease this building? And I said, look, I'm the young kid on the block here. I'm 29. It's my first time doing an RFP. I mostly don't know what I'm talking about, but I do know what's happening in the marketplace, leasing wise. This I know. So I said, Daniel, I'd rather tell them like it is. I said, what little I know of this group of people, they're smart, they're sharp, they don't suffer fools. Let's tell them the truth. Usually the guy that tells you the truth doesn't win the mandate. Because this is my experience. The guy who sells you the dream, that guy wins the mandate. I said, fuck it, let's tell them the truth. We did. We won. They told us later, you guys are the guys that got closest to our underwriting. We knew you were trying to sass us. They hired us. Okay. So within a few weeks, I'm touring the building with John Love. I, I can't imagine he remembers, but I remember. And you're like, it's John Love. This guy had just sold part of Oxford. He sailed the world for I don't know how long. And this was like one of the first things he was doing. And it was like, there was their bijou in Montreal. Whereas that building wasn't the bijou of the portfolio it was in. It was like the ugly duckling. So it didn't get the love and attention. And that's why I think there was sort of this perpetual vacancy issue. So John Love wants to tour the building. I'm touring the building with John Love, meeting in the lobby, walking around. This guy is like 100 miles an hour. If you think I talk fast, it's like, let's go. No time to waste, right? And one of the selling points of the building was the previous owner had recently renovated in the last 10 years, maybe less. They had this program of renovating all of their common areas. Taste is subjective. They look fine. It was all brand new, looked great. John wants to see the vacancy. What's the vacancy look like? You want your vacancy to not look like a shambles. It's too tough for people to imagine, how do I actually occupy this space? We're talking about a CEO of a company that just bought a $42 million asset. And he stops dead in his tracks in the hallway and he's like, you see that? And I'm like literally shitting in my pants. He's like, there's a couple of stitches missing from the carpet base. That piece of carpet that goes up against the wall? So it had come unstuck, like to the tune of like 2 or 3 stitches. We had to get somebody on that immediately. I don't want people to think that we don't take care of our buildings. So it was literally like, sir, yes, sir, clip the heels. Who do I fucking fire for this? Like, who do I call? We've had the building for like a handful of weeks, I want to say. I don't remember specifically. And you're like, that's how it gets done. Like if you're not paying attention to that, it's a slow, like what else are you going to just sort of like, I had a property manager tell me once, Peter, I don't have time to walk around the building. This is your job. I don't have time to walk around the building to see if there's like ceiling tiles missing or if there's a light fixture broken. I'm too busy doing budgets or this or that or whatever. And my boss promptly fired her like within a couple of weeks because you're like, you can't have that kind of level of I don't care. And this is what you're transmitting, right? When you walk into that building, if your level of I care isn't evident to people, they're already asking themselves, why am I here? I had to take the bus. It took this much time. My kids were crying. I had to go to the daycare. My mom wants this for me tonight. They're already not in a great frame of mind. And now you walk in and you have to spend your day here and it's like mediocre at best.
It's kind of funny because property management is viewed like forget the ugly duckling, like the step cousin that nobody wants to talk about, nobody wants to pay. Like for me, property management is our unfair advantage because I'm from an operations world. So to me, I can't imagine owning a building or servicing a building for an owner and then outsourcing like the service of it. It's like if you bought an iPhone and then your iPhone breaks and it's like, oh no, you can't go to the Apple store.
Yeah.
You got to go 1-800 iPhone repair management company, and that person never answers. It makes no sense.
Look, there's a lot of pressure on the bottom line, and property management is very often one of the things you try to streamline to make it as cost efficient as possible. And to be fair, for a long time, it didn't really matter, right? Like, provided your building was clean, the elevators were working, and the HVAC was working, people didn't really have that much more of an expectation of what they might get out of their office building. And look, I started in 97. Nobody was asking these questions. But by the time 2015 rolled around, I have people from marketing and HR on the tour. It used to be the COO or the CFO, sometimes both. And that's it. And that's the financials drove the decision because we were all sort of like birds of a feather. But things just changed.
And now, what do you think about it?
I think now it's that on steroids. I can't even tell you how much more proactive you're going to need to be because they're fighting to get people back into the office. And I firmly believe that there's something that is hard to measure, that you can't measure, that isn't happening when people aren't there, but that the way it'll translate is at the bottom line after 2 or 3 years, you're going to look at your competitor and say, why are they eating our lunch? Huh, they hang out together at the office more than we do. I think is going to be empirical evidence. Like I would not accuse the Royal Bank of like wasting money. Like there's a reason why they're saying, no, 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 no. People got to come back. They have figured out, notwithstanding the hardship, I have zero empathy for anybody who used to live on island and moved 2 hours north because of the pandemic. Like, look, you know what? You took a risk. Perhaps you shouldn't have given, you know, I, it never occurred to me this thing might be permanent. Even where I work now, we have a convoluted policy, but we do offer work remote as part of the strategy. It's one of the tools. I don't love it. You know, like some days your conversation is sort of like unfinished. Now you're waiting 2 days. Am I really going to Teams you? No, but maybe that's because I'm like, I like the tech, but I don't love the tech. So, I'd rather text you, but if I text you, I don't see your face. There are people that want to Teams me and like, just call me on my cell phone. Why do I need to? I could call you from anywhere. Now you're forcing me to be at my desk to have this conversation. The whole thing is kind of like a bit out of whack. And maybe I sound like a dinosaur, but I'm convinced that people create energy and opportunities for learning and not inertia, but sort of like there's a spark that happens when people are in the same room that just doesn't happen if you're not there. So what are you missing out on, right? So we're saying, look, I don't want to say yes every day. I want to say yes twice a week. So you're missing out on those three other opportunities. That's really how I view it. Again, with special dispensations for people that have other real daily obligations. Like that's a very real thing, like
Knowing that office has changed a lot, and you were on the innovative spectrum of office, I can say, because I don't see any other office building having any kind of renaissance like you participated in with PVM. And now being in the multifamily world, do you see the same thing on that front where there's not a lot of innovation?
there's plenty, um, but it's only getting started.
Like right now, there's a plethora of developers
Yep.
that built up inventory that for the first time in forever hasn't absorbed. We read headlines that there's no availability of apartments. We know that that is a massive understatement of the entire inventory. There's not a lot of availability, but in the new build inventory, there's a lot of availability.
Yeah.
Things being built in today's costs need to rent with today's dollars, meaning that if something was built at 600 a foot, unfortunately, that's going to be a rent in the 2000s and above. Um, what do you think needs to change for these things to absorb? Like, is there a way to innovate on multifamily, or is it just like a timing thing?
No, look, I think, there was a time when everybody thought industrial was like, this was the asset class. Oh my God, we're all gonna make a $1 gazillion. It's so easy. We're going to make a gazillion dollars on industrial. Everybody plot into industrial. They're feeling some pain. Then it was like multifamily. A lot of people rushed to the whole, me included, by the way. One of the reasons I work at Bertone was I want to learn this business. I don't know anything about it. I have my instincts. I have my experience. I want to learn how to do this. I've never done the multifamily business. And we are also now learning, the thing we underwrote 5 years ago is not at all, what it is turning out to be today in real terms. It's hard to look your banker in the eye and go, the underwriting might have been a bit off, but it's clear. The signals are everywhere, right? The CMHC is telling you what's happening. The government turned the taps down a little bit on immigration and made it tougher for students. Like, they took away some of your demand. But all these projects that take 2 and 3 years to deliver, they're in the ground. So now they're being delivered. And for the first time in a generation, rents are going backwards. Like, it's hard to believe, but it's true. I think there's no lack of opportunity for innovation in that asset class, from building things differently to the types of services you're going to give in your building and the types of amenities that you're going to invest in. But I think you have to really cater to the neighborhood that you're in. Like, there's a very real thing about the incomes people have and how much they're prepared to spend on, rent and a car,
Mhm.
depending on where it is that they live and how much of those two things they have. Some of them are giving one up because they closer to transit. So, like, I don't have all of the answers, but there's no question. Like, I grew up in subsidized housing. I didn't know I grew up in subsidized housing because I was too young to figure it out. It's my brother who told me last year. It's like, no, no, man, we grew up in an HLM. Do you not remember the signs on the wall? And I'm like, of course not. I was 5, 6, 7 years old. I can tell you that in that building, we had 2 washing machines, a dryer, and the apartments. That was it. That's how you keep that rent affordable. In the projects we're doing, we're trying to keep them affordable. We have gyms, interior parking, lounges, pools. Like, people are whining about the affordability, but it's like, look at what you're getting. Like, these things cost money. Plus, the cost of construction have gone bananas basically since 2016.
I've read that, to go with what you're saying, I've read that, um, folks complain that 30, 40 years ago, a home was like 1 year's wage. But another thing that they don't talk about was the average home was 1,400 square feet, a
Yeah.
single family home.
Yeah.
And now the average home is 2,600 square feet. So it's almost double. So of course, homes relative were more affordable, and
Yeah.
many reasons why on a per pound basis. But it's also, we're expecting much more now.
Look, people are expecting much more, but you don't have to dig very deep to see that incomes have not kept pace with the cost of life. Okay. I I'm a capitalist at heart, but I do believe there's a trade-off to be had, which I'm very happy to make, by the way. I once explained to my kids how taxes worked when they were very little. You contribute to this pot, we get healthcare, we get roads, we get all these benefits and services if ever you should need them. I think it's foolhardy to think that the real estate industry is going to solve the affordability crisis. We can't. And the thing is, unless you're a developer, everybody thinks the developer is making away like a bandit, but you've seen the pro formas. I have never seen pro formas this thin in my entire life, ever. And the construction costs are crazy. So it's not like we want to rent it for $2,000 a month because we're evil and greedy. You're like, to make a reasonable risk-adjusted return based on the financing options that are on the table, it's very hard to do for less than X. So what's that mean? It means the apartments are getting smaller because the real incomes people have to be able to pay you those rents, it's contractual, right? Like, salaries are lower in Montreal than they are in Toronto. Um, it's the purchasing power that you're dealing with. Do I think it is absolutely sad that a person can't afford rent in Montreal? Yeah, it's a travesty. It means, as a society, I believe we've let people down. Okay. Like, if you have a job and even so if you have a job, you should be able to find a place you can afford. If you're in a couple and you still can't find a place you can afford, this, like, we're doing something wrong. Like, we're an industrialized nation. There's stuff happening in the Middle East. It's a hell of a lot easier to be sitting in Montreal today than it is to be sitting in that part of the world. How is it we can't make things, not things, it's a basic necessity. Like, you need a roof over your head. So
Mhm.
I'm going to throw that one to the governments to be like, look, you guys need to develop a plan to figure out how do we make this accessible for people that had incomes of a level of X. Like, it doesn't make sense, PJ.
Mhm.
Like, you can't tell people $14 an hour and then good luck finding an apartment for 2 grand a month.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. Okay, my last question, I'm gonna read it 'cause last question, it's like my home run question.
Uh-oh.
If you could go back in time and give 1997 Peter, the one you were talking about, who just walked in, 23-ish to 28-year-old Peter, who had no idea what he was getting into, one thing that took you 25 years to understand, that you now know now, what would you tell him?
So I'll give you 2 answers. The unromantic one is go to Toronto, which was the plan, okay? Without question, I'd be significantly more financially successful if I'd gone to Toronto, just like all my friends did in 1997. So, if that's not an option, I'd say, cut down the amount of time you're gonna spend in the brokerage world, um, and get to Canderel faster, and be more insistent on the types of things you wanna work on, even if you don't know at all what it is you're talking about. The value of being in that room when those conversations are happening, the earlier they're happening in your life, the more valuable, like the value is exponential. So if you're timid because you don't want to look stupid, you don't want to look foolish, you don't want to ask a question because you don't know, they all know you don't know. You're a kid, right? Get in the room, get in as many rooms as you can, as fast as you can. The value to you will be exponential. And I would share this with anybody who's coming out of school. Like, when I hear the whole work-life balance argument, I'm kind of like, Jesus Christ. And I'm going to quote Scott Galloway. He says, you can have it all. You just can't have it all at once.